Yeah, we're live. I'm going to fix that. I need a little bit more lighting going on here. So I'm going to fix that up right away. Boom. Yeah. Feel the heat. We got the video up today on the two very cool motors. When I was down at West Tech, we went to the wrecking yard and got not one, but two different LS motors. One of them, big score, 5.3 liter L33, all aluminum, which is awesome. And I never find one of those. So it was an all aluminum block and very stout. I get questions all the time from people. Can we make as much power out of an aluminum block LS motor as we can out of an iron block? And the answer is yes, but it depends. There's a caveat there. I don't normally do that with an LS1, LS2, or LS3 block, but on the 5.3 stuff, guys have made millions of horsepower with those. So that block, like the L33 that I scored at the wrecking yard, is perfectly capable of going to, you know, whatever number you think is going to be right, 1500 or like we've done before on the iron blocks. I got no problem with that. It would definitely do that. It would definitely take that. So not only does it have the power potential of the iron block, it also has less weight, and so it's way more desirable. And I just never find any aluminum motors in the wrecking yard when I go look. All I find are just like a dozen or more LM7s, LR4s, you know, the kind of run-of-the-mill 5.3s and stuff. Even I should keep a chart of this. It would be interesting to have it back here, you know, a chart of the Gen 3 stuff versus the Gen 4 stuff that I find, because it's almost predominantly, you know, early Gen 3 stuff. Lots of, oddly enough, lots of 2000 stuff. But this was a cool score. So the L33 was great. And I got two of them. I wanted a 5.3 and a 4.8. And in fact, when I went there looking, I was really just kind of looking for a 4.8. But then after seeing this 5.3, I'm like, oh yeah, definitely, you know, I have to get that because of what it is. First of all, I had 799 heads, which that is the second pair of heads that I've ever seen in a wrecking yard of 799 heads. The other one were on a front wheel drive LS4 version. And so I don't see those very often. Then when I took a closer look, I'm like, oh, that's probably an aluminum block there. I was first thinking 6 liter when I saw it, but then turns out that it's, for me, you know, it wouldn't be an aluminum 6 liter. I don't know why I was thinking that, but it turns out as an L33, it's awesome. It has 799 heads, which lots of people like, and being aluminum and plenty powerful. And we've already run a ton of tests on it already. So we've already run the Truck Norris cam from Brian Tooley Racing. We run the Sloppy Stage 2. We did both of those NA. We did both of them with boost. We ran the stock cam. I ran the stock exhaust manifolds. I ran headers. We ran turbos on both of the Brian Tooley and the Sloppy Stage 2 cams. Have not changed ring gap on that motor, just ran it with boost. But again, 7 pounds-ish and E85 and air-to-water intercooler. And, you know, so it was all fairly safe. And I think we only had 20 degrees or timing in there or something. So it was all plenty safe for running the power level that we were at. And then even use that data to compare the 5.3 with the Truck Norris cam to the 8.1 liter big block, because they both made the same power. And again, I'm still getting comments on that. Oh, you needed to give the big block a cam, you know, give it a fighting chance. I'm like, it's not about a big block versus an LS. It's that they both made the same power NA, and they have wildly different combinations and wildly different cam timing, and yet they both made the same power NA. And when we added boost, you know, the power, the boost level that we ran was the same, the turbo and all that stuff. And then, so it's a good comparison. So that's the 5.3. That was a huge score. That was fantastic. I couldn't ask for anything more than that. The 4.8 was a different thing, as I showed. The cool thing is I got to do the video on which is what I got the thumbnail from. It's just a screenshot from the video. The thumbnail is a screenshot from the video that I did, and the guys that are here all the time, the 2 Live Crew guys, will be here. They will understand what that is, because they got to see that motor running, because on one of the live feeds, I ran that motor without the exhaust while you guys were there and took you into the dyno cell. And you could see that it's running and there's fire coming out, which is just an awesome kind of thing. And it makes you wonder, okay, is this all going on when I have headers on here? Is this what I'm really, is this what's really happening? But it also shows that particular motor was not running on all the cylinders. There was as we saw flames coming out. Unfortunately, we did not see flames coming out of all of the cylinders. So you could hear it when it's running, because when you start a motor and it's down even one hole, it sounds bad. When it's down two holes, it sounds terrible. It sounds awful. And especially when you what I did in the video is I did both a high-speed version of the thing, because then it just sounds like the motor's running at a higher engine speed. And when you do a slow-mo version of that, that's when you can really tell that there's a miss going on, and in this case, more than one miss going on in the firing order of the V8. They're just not all there, and you can tell it's it's shaking, and it's just generally unhappy. But it makes for a cool video to see the fire coming out. And we found that out after putting the 4.8 up on the dyno. It had great oil pressure. In fact, better oil pressure than the L33. So I thought, hey, this thing's definitely going to be a winner. But then after taking the valve covers off, I'm like, oh yeah, well, right off the bat. And I thought, okay, this is going to be easy. That rocker is undone. And then I took a close look at it. I'm like, no, it's more than that rocker being undone. That rocker has a giant sized bolt jammed through it. It's no longer rocking. And it's no longer attached to the head either. So it has all of these things. And the guy tried to use plastic or glue or something to I think to glue the thing in place. Is not going to be operating, obviously, because it doesn't have enough strength to do that. And what happened was the rocker bolt was broke off in the head. Not uncommon, I guess. And Troy was actually able to get that out after, and this is before we put this motor up on the dyno. All of the exhaust bolts on one side were all broke off on the head. So Troy got all those out, and there were a couple on the other side that were also broke off, and he got those out. And then he was able to get the rocker bolt out as well. Although if you look at it closely in the video, you'll see when I show it, the guy had tried to do some sort of fix on this and was trying to drill out the bolt with a drill bit that was already way too big. And when he's drilling, the drill did the same thing it does all the time. It finds the path of least resistance, and a broken off bolt, especially one that's not flat at all, what it wants to do is pitch the drill off to the side. And the drill's like, oh, look, aluminum over here. I'm just going to drill into the aluminum. So he's elongated the hole. There's enough threads there that I think that it looks like the rocker bolt will bolt on and torque down and won't have any problem. Even if I have to put another head on there, it's not a big deal. On the other side, though, there's also a miss on the other side. I found when we took the valve cover off, I found a bent push rod. So I thought, oh, that's unusual. Maybe the rocker came undone or loosened up or something, and maybe that's it. And then after checking that, we decided to look into it a little bit more. So I took the head off, and when I took the head off, it was just a mess. Not only had the guy been running it like that, but he would run like that for quite a while, because neither one of the cylinders were firing. And one of them was the one with the broken or the bent push rod was just the intake port on the head was almost just completely sealed with, I don't know if it's burnt oil or carbon buildup or something. It was just terrible. And same thing with the combustion chamber and the top of the piston were all just, it was just a mess in that cylinder. Also, one of the exhaust valves had hit a piston, so the valve was bent. So there's a lot going on with that particular 4.8. But the thing is, and then we started looking deeper into it because the push rod was bent. I'm like, I wonder what's going on with the lifter. And the lifter, after we took the head off, we had access to the lifter trays. When I took the lifter trays out, the lifter trays were broke. Not just loose and to allow the rocker to spin, which is fairly common with real high mileage ones. They just get worn out and deteriorate from the heat and the environment that they're in for a long time, and they wear out. And my big concern when I have those is when I'm doing cam swaps is they don't hold the lifters up anymore. So when you rotate the cam, usually the lifters go up and are held in place, and then you can do a cam swap. But with these high mileage ones, they just don't. They go up and come back down immediately. So you can't do a cam swap unless you slide dowels in or the little tools in that we have to hold the lifter in place. But these were broke. These are cracked. And you don't see that nearly as much. At least I don't. I haven't seen that nearly as much. I've seen the worn out ones, but the cracked ones were from damage. And so I thought, well, what's going on? And when we took the lifter out, after taking the head off and the tray off, we took the lifter out like, oh, yeah, that's what's going on. the cam lobe was destroyed. But again, normally we associate what normally happens is, like I said, if the tray is bad, it allows the lifter to rotate, then the roller is not rolling in the direction of the camshaft, and it's sideways or 90 degrees or some other kind of angle relative to the lobe, and then it just destroys the lobe. And that's what happens. That's what happened on my other 4.8, and it's happened to lots of people. But this lifter still was good, but the cam was worn out. So maybe it had happened before and the guy put another lifter. I don't, there's no way to know. But anyway, the cam's bad. Obviously, I'm not going to reuse that lifter. The push rod's bad. The rocker, I think, is still good on that side. We have hundreds of stock push rods laying around that we take out and we've replaced with other things. On the other side, because Troy has pulled the bolt out, that side would just need, it's actually going to need, I could reuse, it has in addition to the rocker being bad and the bolt being broken off, he also, whoever the owner was, he or she broke the rocker tower, the rocker, what is it called? Rocker tray. No, that's a lifter tray. So what are they called? Rocker stands. So he broke the rocker stand. I don't know if he over torqued it or who knows what he was doing. So, but another one of those, I've got 10 of those sitting around, so it's not a problem. So really the question is, and I'm going to go ahead and put the poll up right now because we got enough people here. So the poll is, should I rebuild this? And when I say rebuild, here is my idea of rebuild. It's not put new rods and pistons and rings and bearings and hone it and machine and do all that. I'm not doing any of that. It's not getting that. When I say rebuild, what I mean is rebuild means I'm going to put one new, and by new, I mean used lifter that I have laying around in a bag from another motor that I've taken it out of. I'm going to put that in. I'm going to put another stock used cam that I have because I have a couple of LM7 LR4 cams. I also have the stock cam that we pulled out of the L33. I have cams, so I could stick another used cam in there. So a used lifter, a used camshaft, another used push rod or two if I need two of them, a used rocker, which I've got a couple of sets of those again from the various junkyard motors that I have that we've taken apart. Things that are broken, we take all the pieces off and shove them in a box. So I have a bunch of excess LS stuff. So the only thing new that I would be putting on here is I will buy new lifter trays because like I said, I want them to hold the lifters up because if I'm going to run this 4.8, I'm going to be doing cam swaps on it. So we want to make sure that I can do that. So new lifter trays, probably new head gaskets too. Just, I'm going to do a razor blade rebuild on it, also a new, and by new, I mean used valve. So a used valve, a used exhaust valve, which I have another set of 706 heads. I could just replace the head if I wanted to, but I'd like to just do it with a valve. So should I rebuild it by putting all of these old used stuff that I have, razor blade, and in fact, I should probably put that. Should I razor blade rebuild the 4.8 liter with used parts? Okay, so since it's a yes or no question, should I razor blade rebuild the 4.8 liter with used parts? The option to that, and I can't put it in the poll, the option to that would be, or should I just go get another one from the wrecking yard? So if you're answering yes, I should do a razor blade rebuild, that means I shouldn't go just buy another one from the wrecking yard. So essentially the poll is, which one of those things should I do? Should I razor blade rebuild the 4.8 with the used parts as I just described? Let me know yes or no, and that will be our poll. We'll get that going. And I have to say, this is more than, for me, and I'm sure for you guys out there too, for me, this decision is much more than simply a financial thing. So we're not talking about a whole lot of money getting the motor from the wrecking yard. It's less than $500 for the complete motor, the way that I got it. And so it's not an insurmountable amount of money. It's not like it's going to make or break the situation. I have since, for a long time, I didn't have any LS motors like I test. I had the 1.6 liter that is leaking. But other than that, I had no other ones. And now I have an avalanche of them. and that's how it happens. So I have the broken 4.8 that was all rusty. I have the L33. I have this 4.8 that's not working. I'm going to pick up, hopefully, was going to be today, but maybe tomorrow, another 5.3. The rusty 4.8, I'm going to turn into a 6-liter from a 4.8, or not a 6-liter, but a 6-liter bore out of the 4.8. So I have a, when it rains, it pours. So I just have an avalanche of LS test motors, which is, again, that's just nothing but good. So, then the thing is, if I didn't rebuild the 4.8 razor blade, rebuild it, and went to the wrecking yard, got another one, then I would have yet another one. And if I had another one, I would also have the broken one. So is it just going to sit around? Would I just throw it all away? Would I just part it out and get the pieces out that I could then put in my bins and reuse for other things later on? So that's the question. Should I razor blade rebuild the one there? And like I said, the decision is not like, it's not a financial thing. A lot of people, and I get these comments a lot from the videos that I put up. They're like, well, yeah, but the LS is the best thing in the world because it's the cheapest. I'm thinking, yeah, but that's not how I run my whole life. Like I want the Chevy Sprint turbo motor to make more power. And, maybe putting a V8 in it or a V6 or even a 4-cylinder upgrade from the 3-cylinder makes more sense. A B series Honda swapped in if you could get the B series, like a B16 or a B18 or something, to fit in that Sprint chassis, it would be an animal and it would be awesome. But it would be a different kind of awesome than building and making the stock one not what it is stock, but what it can be better. Same thing with the 2.2. Same thing with all of these things. For me, there's a whole level of excitement that goes into doing these things to all these different motors. And it doesn't matter to me that one is cheaper to do or makes more financial sense or whatever, because there's going to be people that love the 3800 V6. That's what they have. And yeah, a V8 will make more power than a V6, but they have the V6 and they want to make more power. And so I'm going to show them how to do it. Guy that has a Cadillac, guy that has a Slant 6, what a 455 Buick. Hopefully I get that thing back together. I have lots of them that need to go back together. I've been talking endlessly with my buddy Jimmy about the J series Honda stuff. And so, and also when we go into these new motors, I get to learn stuff that I didn't know before that about a new engine family, which also is cool. And so the decision to do or not do the 4.8, for me, there's value in taking something that wasn't working and making it work. So there's value in that. And it's not the same value as, look, it's just go spend another couple $100 and then you're done and you're ready to go again. And I might think about doing that if there was a time element to what I'm doing and I have to race on Saturday and it's Thursday, and then I might do that. But all of those things would have to be given consideration when you're choosing what you would choose. Like I said, I like the fact that I know how to make these things better, or to be as good as they were, at least, not even just better, because what I'm talking about is just going to make the 4.8 be a 4.8. It's not going to be an unimaginably powerful 4.8. It's just going to be a 4.8. And right now it's not. And again, so for me, there's value in doing that. And there's value in doing that with any kind of motor. That's why I'm excited about doing the Sprint and the 2.2 and anything that goes on there, because people want to see what happens when we run a turbo on the 292 inline 6-cylinder Chevy or the 300 Ford, if we can get to that, or a 4-liter Jeep. All of that stuff is just, there are guys there that live and breathe for that kind of thing. And and I want to show them what can be done. So it's kind of cool stuff. So hopefully if you haven't watched that video, go check it out. If for no other reason, then you get to see the thing shooting fire out at different speeds and with the light on and with the light off. And, that's kind of cool stuff. So I'm going to cover this up for just a second. Okay. Casey, so let's see what you guys got going on. Casey, I would put a new oil filter and oil in the 4.8 and try to get some of the crunchies out. There is a fair bit of that. And honestly, there was a fair bit of that in the 5.3 as well, because that one came from the Great White North. It came from Alaska, actually. And so there, it had a lot of stuff. In fact, if you look at the two motors, when I cleaned them up, the 4.8 iron block looked a lot better than the aluminum block did, because the aluminum block had a bunch of stuff. I'm thinking from the roads, the salt and stuff that they put on there up there in the snow, in the snowy areas. And so it's kind of taken its toll on the aluminum. I would like to, I don't know, take the aluminum one apart and make it look nicer. Maybe I can try some of the Easy Off. That seems to do pretty well on stuff, so I might want to try that. Mikey, I have two 1 liter Honda Insight 3 cylinders that need to be big bang. It's called a little bang, yeah. I forgot that those were 3 cylinders. That's pretty cool. And that's like a proper one though. I think that's a 4-valve motor and stuff, right? Would love to see a head cam stroker Jeep on the channel. Yeah, I would like to do the 4-liter Jeep, and I'd like to do the 300 Ford as well. Neil, rebuilding is more content worthy and has a lower carbon footprint. Okay. And again, the reason that I do stuff is usually not based on, like, I think more people will watch it. There are lots of things I do that I think are cool and that people are like, eh, but I still liked it and I still wanted to do it. Todd, I ain't no punk. Richard, I'm in my garage getting things ready. Okay, cool. So you have the truck there and stuff, and we'll be yanking the motor out of it. And since you have it mostly apart, put some ring gap in. Oh, and the 4.8, that's probably not a bad idea. Dude, Truck Norris has to be a lot larger than the LS9. How can the LS9 not be good for the 4.8? The LS9 is a terrible choice of camshaft for the 4.8 liter. It loses a ton of power down low, and it's even worse on a 4.8. A Truck Norris cam would be way better than an LS9 cam. And honestly, a Truck Norris cam might even tend to be on the big side. It's only 212 at 50 on the intake duration, but it's still, the cams are relatively bigger on a 4.8 than they are on a 5.3 or 6.0. Go to the junkyard is good for the soul. I'm there a lot. I'm soul searching a lot. JB Well, the magnet to the LS oil pan near the oil pickup for science. I know that we had when I say we, Westech had a magnet, a filter magnet. So it's this big, flat, curved, arced magnet that you put on the side of the filter, and then ostensibly when everything flows through there, it grabs all, most of the stuff goes to the bottom of the filter anyway, but ostensibly that just grabs all the stuff on the filter and keeps it away and out of the rest of the filtration oil. It would be interesting to see how that works, because the magnet, I think, if it was placed right, would still allow us to cut the top of the filter off. And then we could see if all of that stuff was like, all of it was hugged up against the magnet side. How large is the LS9 cam? It's a 211, 230. But that's not the thing. The thing is, it has 121 or 22 degree LSA, which is why it just kills all the low speed power. Take a look at the video that I have up where I tested all the factory cams, and you can see what the LS9 and the LS7 cam, which are almost identical, you can see what they do. The power is destroyed at the lower engine speeds. I looked at your playlist and I don't see a 2.5 Iron Duke. I haven't run one of those ever. I've seen them run on a chassis dyno, but I've never built one. Neil would love to chat about the little 3-cylinder 4 valves. They have so much technology. They do. That's kind of cool stuff and I really like I'm a big fan of the early Insights. I really like those. I like them mostly because of their aero signature. They're really good for like Bonneville cars. What junkyard is he getting his engines from? A 6.0. I haven't found ever any 6.0s, so I'm not the guy to look for 6.0s. The one I go to is Ontario, around the corner from Westech. I have a Rusty Dog. I have a 6.8 liter V10. If you want to test a 2-valve, that is another one that's on my list. Picking up truck tomorrow. Just organize my tools. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, Todd. And also, I'm told it might rain tomorrow. Richard, would you prefer Felpro or stock GM gaskets for the 5.3? I don't know that I have a preference there. I've run both of those gaskets on the Big Bang motors and never had an issue with head gasket sealing on either one of those. So I haven't seen one of them work better than the other. The LS9 gasket that we use is a pretty big bore for a 5.3. So I think I would tend more toward the Felpro stuff that is actually sized for that smaller bore. Use PC hard drive magnets. Okay, cool. The way the thing was hacked, it definitely has metal in it. He had 2 cylinders getting fuel wash. Whoever owned the thing obviously didn't care about their truck or engine. Yeah, the other thing I want to look at is if I take the, like, I want to find out if I need to take a closer look at the cylinders in those holes. I haven't really looked at those to see if they're, to make sure that there would be ring seal, because that's a real thing, washing them down. I want to see if there is ring seal. So because the other next level thing that I could do is if I took the pistons out, especially if I took them out to do ring gap, then I would just, Westech has a ball hone that I think is for a big block, but I don't care. Just spray WD-40 in there and ball hone it and put it back in there. And yes, I would just reuse the stock rings that I just gapped and put it all back in there and let it run, and it would be fine. Finally, an engine Richard doesn't even want to modify. I do. I would love to run an Iron Duke. I don't know that there. And in fact, I bet I still have. I'm certain that I do. I still have the GM performance manual that has the Iron Duke like performance stuff in it. I don't know that they even offer that. Was many years ago. I don't think they offer it anymore. But an Iron Duke, you could there's no motor that you couldn't run boost on. You need to test cow magnets on the fuel line. I do. Tom, thank you very much. Thank you for testing information. I'm building my first project truck and a turbo kit, cammed 5.3, good start. Twin GT 3582s, 71 Chevy pickup long bed. That should be nice. I just ordered some stuff the other day, the 4-bolt to V-band stuff for the twin max speeding turbos that I'll be running. And I'm hoping, I got 2 sizes, so I'm hoping it fits both the 3076s and the 3582s. I was thinking the LS9 was like a Z06 cam. It's not. It's got a big intake to exhaust spread and a really, really wide LSA. I tested the LS6 cams, the LS2 cams, LS3. All the factory cams are up there, and you can kind of see what they do compared to the LM7 cam. I saw there was an adapter plate to mount a 1UZ to a Chevy Trans. Would it work on the dyno? Yeah, if there's an adapter plate, that's what we use on the 4200 Atlas motor. Love the throttle blade stuff on controlling the inlet manifold pressure compared to the inlet track. So clever to let you run a but bigger turbo but still be responsive. Can't run boost on an electric motor, but we can run a boost to pump on the electric motor. I want to buy HP tuners and wideband O2 sensor to start tuning. What should I be reading or watching to learn before I get started? Well, from a very basic standpoint, you should know what air fuel you want the motor to run at under the different conditions. So when you're running wide open throttle, a good idea to stay safe on an NA motor, you'd like the thing to be like 12.5 to 1. And then if you want to go beyond that and try to find a little bit more power and go 13 to 1, I would say, especially with LS stuff, you're not going to see much in that range, but you're going to see a lack of safety there. So look for stuff like that. On boosted stuff, stay between 11 and 11.5 to 1. And then you can start tuning and make yourself get there, at least under wide open throttle. Of course, you should rebuild it so you can blow it up again. That's right. Richard, would you consider doing a 5.7 bore on the 4.8 and keeping the stock stroke? Yeah, we could do that. We have that already on a 5.3, but that just makes it a 5.7, not a short stroke 5.7. I just ran, well, I didn't run it, but the guys at West Tech ran a 2J motor on the dyno and ran it with pump gas and ran it with race gas. So I'm thinking about trying to do a video on that, the pump gas versus race gas thing. So that will be interesting to see on a turbo 2J. Have I ever been to Gilroy for the Garlic Festival? I actually have. Ball hone and razor blade rebuild a junkyard cam 5.3, or should I just stab a cam in it and send it? I don't know that you necessarily have to rebuild it. If it's already a running motor, I wouldn't take it apart. I would just put a cam and springs in it, and then away you go if it's running well. Richard, what would you expect to find when you test fuel cooling through an oil cooler type deal? I think it's a great idea. I'm hoping that we see a bigger change in power because we see higher temperature under the higher pressure with EFI fuel pressures that are associated with EFI. I know that Freiberger and Brule and Dulcich, when they did a thing for Engine Masters where they did fuel cooling, but they were doing it on a carbureted application, which was a little bit easier because they could get the line through a cool can and stuff and cool it off. But it's only at 7 psi, so I don't think that you get a lot of fuel temperature from that. But I would think that if we're running at 58 psi, that I think we get a lot more fuel temperature. So if we get more, just like when you're running a turbo, you get better gains from an intercooler if you're starting with a 300-degree charge temperature than if you're starting with a 150-degree charge temperature, because you just can't lower it that much relative to whatever your transfer medium. If it's just air, then it's ambient air. If it's ambient water, it's the same thing. If you run ice water, obviously, then you have a bigger differential there. But if your temperature is 300 or 350 degrees and you can cool that back down to 100, then you could show some pretty big power gains. And that's what I'm hoping to show on the fuel cooling with an EFI. I'm hoping that we see high fuel temperatures. I've never even checked them to see what they are, but I'm hoping that they're high at 58 psi. There's a 3-inch V-bend to 90-degree T3, T4 flanges. I don't need T3 or T4 flanges. What I need is the exhaust side on the hot side on a turbo. These are a 4-bolt flange on the exit of the turbo, and I want them to go to a V-band, which is what I got. What's the fastest NA LS 5.3? I don't know. Does anybody out there know? What does razor blade rebuild mean? That means that when I take the head off and of the block, I'll scrape both surfaces with a razor blade to clean them up, and then put a new gasket on and put it back down. And then also part of the razor blade rebuild sometimes is I'll take the valves out of the heads, I'll clean the valves on a wire reel, and then I'll put rubbing compound or polishing compound on the valve where the mating surface is for the valve and the seat. And then I'll take a drill and I'll attach it. I'll slide the valve through and attach the drill, and then put pressure on it and spin the valve with the drill and just seat in the mating surface for the valve and the seat. We'll just seat the valve in so that it seals a little bit better. Is there an advantage other than weight to an aluminum block? Are there non-financial disadvantages to aluminum block? Weight is the big thing. The aluminum blocks are going to cost more because they're more desirable, even if for nothing else, just for weight. Maybe they dissipate heat. Although when we empty an aluminum block and empty an iron block, there's a lot more water in an iron block than there is in an aluminum block. So I don't know. I would imagine GM did their homework on the cooling properties. I don't know which one of them actually cools better. So if you had lots of power and you're producing lots of BTUs and it had to dissipate that, I don't know which one of those would be better. I mean, I know which one's better, aluminum or steel, but if you have less water to transfer that into, maybe they made them the same. In the aviation, oil fuel heat exchangers are used to cool the oil and heat the fuel. Yeah, for high elevation stuff where you're worried about that stuff freezing. When we're running stuff on the dyno, we want the water in the engine to be cold and the oil to be hot. And then ideally, I'd like the fuel also to be cold. Yeah, the really bad combination, people were talking about the LS9 cam. The real bad combination would be to run a 4.8 with an LS9 cam and then put a 317 hit on it. That would be really soft down low. It'd be a really good idea to cool your return line to offset the fuel heat. Yeah, because you should be able to see in your tank, you should be able to see the temperature of the fuel coming back, the heated temperature, increasing the heat of the fuel in your tank. As liquid fuel is much less compressible, does it increase the static compression? 11 to 12 parts of compressible air. You mean if we add more fuel, does it increase the static compression? I think we'd have to do some math there to find out, right? Would we have to? Well, we have to figure out if we're adding more fuel, are we displacing enough to actually change the compression? Gen 1 insights cut through the wind nicely. You guys have successfully turboed them and still pull 60 miles per gallon utilizing the factory lean burn. Do they do lean burn in the? I didn't know if they did in the insight. Once up to speed, only rich under load and low boost. I always wanted to, and I'm still trying to talk Chad into doing it. Like I gave him my VX. I always wanted to run a turbo on that, just so that the thing would make like, instead of, it's rated at like 93 horsepower, and I think it made like 78 or so, or 79 at the tire when I ran it off the chassis dyno. I would like that thing to make like, you know, another 70 or 80 horsepower or something, or even 50 or 60, whatever the gain is, so that it had torque. And I'd like to still have it run lean burn under cruise and stuff, because the turbo is not going to affect any of that. But it would be nice to have extra power. It's nice to have just the VTEC, because you can feel the thing make more power. And it's not like another car that I like a lot is the Metro XFI, which is another kind of, you know, the high water mark for high fuel efficiency car. The problem is like a CRX high fuel or any of those, they did it with a motor that doesn't really make any power either. So they were like 58 horsepower or something. So they're not fun to drive around also, in addition to just sipping fuel, which is what I liked about the VX. Because even at 93 horsepower, it's a little VTEC motor. So it's kind of fun when you're going around in VTEC. It's not obviously going to win lots of races, but still, at least it's making more power than something that's making 50 horsepower. And then if you put a turbo on it and it made 150 horsepower, let's say, instead of 93, which is certainly possible, and still could get, like I could get between 50 and 55 miles per gallon, honest miles per gallon, driving on the freeway in that car, that would be a good combination. It would be fun to have it with boost. I have a blown L6 exhibiting low power symptoms. The old Mustang dyno was 525. There's no it's making that. So that's a speculation that it's not making that now. Compression test showed 95 to 108. First of all, that's a pretty big variation between those, 95 to 108, especially as a percentage standpoint. I don't think that I don't know what camshaft is in that, but your cranking compression should show more than 108. It should be much higher than that. A friend took an LS 4-inch block and a custom 3-inch stroke, and when it was dynoed, it screamed. It was incredible and revved at 11,000 RPM. I don't know how a 3-inch crank is not going to allow you to do that. So if a motor actually rev to 11,000 RPM, it's because it was a race motor and it had an amazing valve train in it and an amazing set of cylinder heads and an amazing intake manifold and a dry sump oiling system and all the other things that you would need to actually run that RPM. A 3-inch crank is not going to do anything. What about injecting fuel before the turbo? All your fuel comes from whatever is injected in front of the turbo before pressure. You can do that. Guys run the water meth injection before the turbo, and it also has the benefit of changing the map on the turbo and maybe improving the efficiency of the turbo. Is a razor blade rebuild like an aerosol overhaul? Yeah, sure. Richard, can too much oil move or affect a windage tray? Can it move? If it's moving the windage tray, you have a problem. The windage tray is not tight enough. The oil won't move it. But if the oil is not below the windage tray and you have the oil level that's really high and it's up above the windage tray, then it's touching the crank. Then the windage tray isn't doing anything. It's still grabbing oil from between the crank and the windage tray, and that would be bad. Your efforts to document engine performance and adherence to the scientific method have been and continue to be appreciated. Thank you very much. Wire brush on a 3.5-inch grinder. Ain't nobody have time for razor blades. that works too. You could do that. I don't know that I would do that on an aluminum block, but on an iron block, I don't think I'd have a problem with that. I have 862 heads on both my 2002 Silverados. That would be normal. One has a 5.3, other one has a 4.8. They interchange 862 and 706 heads on those 5.3s and 4.8s, especially what I would call the lower performance ones, the LR4 and the LM7 and other variants as well too. Those are the ones that I see 99.9% of the time at the wrecking yard. I try to walk over to every LS and I just look and I just wipe by. And somebody else is doing it too. They're walking over because I see the numbers are wiped off already on the head because they're checking the head to see what it is. That's a good point, Dan. Less water helps get it into operating temperature, into closed loop faster for emissions. That makes sense. Isn't it better to put a can of engine restore instead of razor blades? The engine restore is not going to help you with the deck surface, though. I learned my lesson on breaking off manifold bolts. I broke 4 of them off on my first LS header swap. My last header swap, I heated up the bolts with a MAP gas torch, and they all came out no problem. Nice. Yeah, that will help. LS4 intake and exhaust manifolds for the win. Sure. If someone told you a mod was good for 15 horsepower, but it wouldn't show up on the dyno, what would your reaction be? I would say it's probably not accurate. Person that said this is a friend of yours is known well in the industry. It doesn't matter that they're friends or not. I don't know why a modification wouldn't show up on the dyno. How could the power be there and not show up? That would be my question. What would happen if dry ice was added to the fuel tank? You don't want to do that. Dry ice has been used in diesel fuel tanks at lower temperatures to weld cracked tanks with fuel in them. Would you want? I don't know that you'd want to weld something with fuel in it. I don't know what the flash point of diesel fuel is, though. Well, he was talking about the 4.8 with the LS9 for the horsepower. I just wanted to help along the way. Some things don't show up like lighter weight flywheels and clutches unless you choose to write down a rate. We've run lightweight flywheels and drive plates, and it definitely shows up as power on the dyno. But Dan's right. There are things that you would want to check at different acceleration rates, and there might be things that show up on a chassis dyno, especially way down low, that won't show up on an engine dyno where we're controlling the rate of acceleration. If you get something that changes the rate of acceleration, it should show up on one or other of those dynos. Yeah, Casey, that's a good point. For Neil, I think, is that the amount of fuel that they inject into a top fuel motor, that's a lot. I mean, of any situation, I would think that that would be the one to look at for an actual change in static compression. I wonder if somebody has to have done some sort of paper on that or something. Toyota Yaris 1.6 liter 3-cylinder turbo, 268 horsepower. I had a Yaris and it wasn't a 3-cylinder, it was a 4-cylinder. I had a Yaris S, but mine was not a turbo though. Until something in Hot Rod Magazine, I think did years ago, Pontiac Fiero, Iron Duke, some sort of turbo pressurizing and superheating fuel. Oh, that was a thing that they did with, or Smokey Unic did, where they were superheating the fuel. It was this hot vapor engine or something. People are going to get going on that again. Mikey, I had an 85 CRX high fuel with a carb. Yeah, they were carbureted and definitely didn't want to pull out in front of traffic. It was not going to win too many races, but a CRX is a really cool car though. Admiral, that's a good question. I don't think that they do. I don't think that Honda motorcycles have VTEC. There is a 1995-ish single cam Honda D16 head that does both economy and power. There was one D series engine that had triple VTEC. So it had normal operation, it had VTEC cam, and it also did what we call VTEC E. So it did like what the VX does, where it's what is it doing? Is it opening the valves very little, and also at a staggered on the intake valve, they're opening in a staggered arrangement where it opens one intake valve before the other intake valve to induce swirl or mixture motion. So this one had all of those, and it's the only one that I know of that had that. Would a 250 shot of nitrous work well getting twin turbo spooled away? Yeah, that would be a lot. You need 16-to-1 compression to get an engine to 10,000 RPM. Dan, running on nitro does not change the compression ratio. The fuel carries its own oxygen. We know that, but does the fuel not displace? I mean, doesn't it displace some of the? Maybe I'm not thinking about that correctly. I thought it would change. I thought it would take up some of the room, basically, in the swept volume, because there's a lot of fuel there. Yeah, motorcycle engines, they're not anywhere near 16-to-1 to run that RPM. Oh, on a Gen 1 Insight, guys had one injector that they can control. So are they just doing an additional ejector control then? Does somebody not have control of the factory ECU for the Insight so that you can reprogram? Potential for doing a GoFundMe for Richard to develop a 9,000 RPM LS motor. We've already gone over 8,000, but take a look at what Ben did over at EFI University. They have stuff going that's going to 10 or 10.5, I think. So just take a look at that recipe. It took them 2 or 3 years, I think, to develop all of that, but it's pretty impressive. Especially, I think he's using on 900 a 1-inch lift cam. It makes a lot of power. Turbo mods are porting Vortec heads. Richard, how do you space your windage tray for LS3 stroker motors? If you use a 4-inch stroker, a lot of times you can just put a washer between we used factory head or main stud bolts. So you just put a washer on it and then put the windage tray on and then tighten it down with the other like pinch nut that they use. You could put a little bit of Loctite on there just to make sure, and to make sure that you torque them, obviously. And usually that's enough. And then we rotate the motor around, obviously, to make sure that it's not hitting. I have also sometimes had to take the windage tray off and I put it down. We have Westech has like a rubber floor mat that's on the ground. And so I can take a ball peen hammer and you can see if you have the windage tray on, it's bolted down the way that it's going to be. And you spin the motor over and you can hear either a rod bolt or something hitting it, it will actually leave a nice mark for you. And then when you take that off, you can ball peen hammer that little section right there to where it doesn't hit anymore. And then you keep doing that until it doesn't hit anymore and it spins freely, and then you're ready to go. Could you use the 3.9 inch? What is a 3.9 inch piston on a 4.8? Are you talking about the 5.7 piston? Maybe that's what you're talking about. The 3890 one. You can use a 5.7 piston on a 4.8 connecting rod, but you have to use also with the 4.8 connecting rod, you have to use the 4.8 crankshaft, and then you also have to bore the block to that size, whatever size piston you're using. And you need the 4.8 crank and the 4.8 rod, and then that size piston. I'm going to be doing a 6.0 piston with a 4.8 crank and a 4.8 rod, but the 4.8 crank and the 4.8 rod have to go together. The volume the nitro occupies in the CC would change the compression ratio. That's what I'm thinking. I just don't know how much it is. Lifter tap, not bad batch. L7 lifters, 416 on the way to the shop. That's not good. Boost time 2650. That would be good on a 416. Are the 862s a better casting than the 706 on average? I think that they flow exactly the same and make exactly the same power. I don't know about the strength or the rigidity of those. On both of the Big Bang motors, I used a set of ported 706 heads without any problem, and we were making 12 or 1300 horsepower. Who's cooler, Freiberger or Dulcich? They're both really good guys and both knowledgeable, but different things, though. The things that they do are different. Must back purge tanks with argon. Yeah, an inert gas. I don't think that I'd be welding on something that had fuel in it. Would the truck Norris cam be better than a Weekend Warrior Stage 3 cam? I don't know what you're trying to do. And also, that's a wholly subjective thing. Somebody asking me what cam is better is like asking me what color do I like. I can tell you, I can show you what they do on the dyno, and if that's what you like, if you like the one that makes more peak power, the one that makes more low speed power or average power, whatever your thing is, and you like that, and you can decide what you want based on that information, that's great. A lot of times with a camshaft, you can't, because if you're just looking for power, that's easy. But camshaft is usually not just that. It's also idle quality. Does it have the chop? Does it get good mileage? Can they use it with a stock converter? There are a lot of other things that go along with that. I hear Brian Tooley is looking to buy a cylinder head company. That's news to me. We were getting close to 10,000 RPM a cup with 12-to-1 compression before the mandatory gear ratios. So DI might raise. I don't think DI is going to raise effective compression. I don't think that there's enough being injected in there at one time to change the compression. That's why the top fuel thing is a really good example, because they're trying to overload the cylinder with fuel, because the fuel that they're using has oxygen content in it. So basically, the more fuel that they can get in, it's like adding nitrous. The more fuel they can get in, the more power that they can make. That's why they, for a long time, were limiting the amount of nitromethane that they could use. But so the more fuel that they can get in there, for the rest of the applications, it's not just making power with fuel. We have to get air in there also. So the top fuel thing is an interesting deal because of the amount of fuel that they have to use. My Nova is coming along. How's yours? The Nova, actually, I have made headway on the Nova. Yeah, Aaron is using building a Mopar engine, and he's using LS stuff, which is kind of cool. Oh, Mikey, a couple of people hacked that, but it's complicated. Drive-by-wire, on-off demand for the hybrid. Yeah, that would be, you wouldn't want to mess with that, I don't think, unless you had everything exactly right. Let's see. Where did I go too far? Who was looking for a K24? I have a K24A1 short block that was removed for a new rebuilt engine. Can Richard Holder mimic what Smokey did on the Iron Duke? I don't know if I've even read all of that story. How about a 1982 Camaro Iron Duke build? Yeah, BTR just expanded their shop. Every time the intake valve opens, 60 cc's of fuel goes in. That's a lot. Admiral, thank you very much. Big single fuel pump or multiple smaller ones. Again, sometimes that's packaging. If you want to put it inside the tank, I like having the electric pumps inside the tank for cooling. We've had some not good luck with, like, we've run big air motives and stuff down under the tank, and I liked it a lot better when we basically had just a lift pump from the tank, like in our World Challenge car, a lift pump from the tank up into a surge tank, and then had I think we only had a single in there because we were only running an NA motor. But you could also, because then the surge tank was basically slender and tall. I think it was 1 gallon, but that way we never had any slosh in it. I mean, if you got to the point where you drained that down, there was no more fuel left in the tank. And so if you drained that down, you were out of gas. And that's what we wanted to do, because we wanted to make sure that we could drive every bit of the fuel that our tank would allow. And so I think for a lot of times, Admiral, that's going to be a function of what will fit in the tank that you're using and for the application that you're using and how you want to fit it. Because the other thing I didn't like about some of those pumps is having it hang down low, because you ideally, to be gravity fed, you want it lower than the tank. And a lot of times that's just not possible. What do you think about intake manifold floor heat? I bypassed my Chrysler 2.2 TBI intake heater hose and it stumbled on acceleration. Somebody said fuel atomization. That could be the case in colder temperatures, but we don't see that on the dyno, though. The Iron Duke would hit 1,000 horsepower, no problem, with 50 pounds of boost. No fuel pump in the tank will not heat the fuel at all. Richard, I have about 4 or 5 old school 354 bolt main and nitrous plate kit double pumper carb just dying to go in the Nova. Yeah, I have to admit, I don't understand why the comment about compression ratio and RPM. I don't know why those two things would be necessary. I mean, I understand the need for making power and how compression helps that, but yeah, yeah, Bart, the surge tank was for slosh. If you're talking about the Bear Racing World Challenge cars, we had one that Bernie built for the when I bought the B car, and then we turned it into an IMSA Bridgestone supercar. So we ran the supercharged motor with it, and that setup works really well. Have you ever seen anybody cut the ears off of a crank? Yeah, I don't know that you want to do that. Yes, and definitely hit the like button. 2 more minutes. When I had my Mustang, I had an in the tank pump, and back then we were using like 155s or something. And then I had it feeding a big Bosch turbo pump or a 928 pump or something that the guys from NOS hooked me up with. And I even had a bypass to go around it if we wanted it to, so that I could turn that other pump off. But it gave us enough fuel flow that where our pressure wasn't dropping. It gave us enough fuel flow to run the Vortec motor that I had in the Mustang, and it worked really good. We ran it in the Silver State and stuff. Is there any way to see you do a big bang test on a 463 valve? Actually, I would be much more interested in doing a big bang on a 462 valve. Mikey, I did a razor blade rebuild on my 1500 HD. It's been running great for 10,000 miles. See, it's like guaranteed, right? I think it was a Bosch 44, Dan. I think it was. Safe ring gap on a 10 PSI, 5.3 liter daily driver. Yours will be the last question of tonight. And 10 psi on a 5.3, you could, I would normally just put the ring gap in it. I wouldn't go, I'm going to go a little bit less because I'm only going to run low boost, because you're going to run low boost right now. And then later on, you're not going to run low boost. So just put it in, and I would go normally 28 or 30 thousandths. Casey, trimming down a crank. Yeah, you can trim it down, but I think that he's talking about just taking the counterweights off, and that's probably not a good idea. But knife edging and doing that kind of stuff will definitely improve it, because it helps get rid of crank weight and also helps get rid of windage, which both are very important. Thank you guys all for showing up. If you have not taken a look, wait, I got to end my poll here. So it looks like most people, I think that this is this the most one-sided poll we've had? Should I razor blade rebuild the 4.8 with used parts as opposed to just go getting another one? 82% said yes, which that's awesome. So we'll end that poll. I don't see how a lighter crank wouldn't necessarily rev faster. What if other things are holding that back? So that's the last thought for tonight. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.